Hi everyone. We are. This is Faith and Honest Conversation. I'm Thomas Rowland, and this is James. We met when we were training in our counselling course, on an integrative course that really focused on spirituality as well, a key component of that. We're here just to explore, just to wrestle with and try to understand and try, I guess, maybe the hardest bit is just try to articulate what our experiences of faith and what we understand by it. Where it's really powerful, where it's really really a source of life in us, and also wrestling with some places where we've tripped up around it, I guess. James, would you like to kick us all off? Is anything really hot for you?
Before, when you asked me that, there wasn't. But
if I ask it enough times,
yeah,
something will happen.
It just takes my mind a little bit of time to settle, and actually, it was we've been going through sort of different words that have I guess a nuanced meaning and a depth of meaning for us all. Like certainly, like I've been bringing various words that have impacted me in my spiritual life and just life in general. And it was when you said, let's take a breath. And I was like, there it is. That's the word there. Breath is such a powerful word. And I was like sort of thinking, okay, is that just because Tom said it? And I just letting it mull around in my head. And no, it feels really right. It feels like a really good word. And I can sort of go, oh yeah, no, that definitely, there's a lot there for me that really resonates on a spiritual level, as well as like a sort of physical level. It sort of kind of ties things together in a really beautiful way.
I think I'm becoming really hot on. I say I'm becoming hot. I'm really bad at it, but really loving this idea of our spirituality being embodied. Like there's something about us being embodied souls, that everything spiritual is in our bodies, is through our bodies, and that word breath or spirit, or it's really got connotations for both, hasn't it? Like the breath of God, our own spirits, the breath that we take. So I really love that. Really love that connection as a point. Really, I think a lot of my spirituality in the past has been in my head, and it's kind of going away from this spirituality of the head where you've got to be correct and know the right things and argue or kind of go deeper and know lots of stuff, and actually going into my body is a really great thing for me.
And I think what you described there for me, it would be like the difference between theology and spirituality, or like that where you've got all of the knowledge and ideas and sort of concepts or precepts or like really solid foundational teaching and all of this richness, which some of which can be so helpful and so fertile, but it without that seed, without that breath, without that life, it's worthless, isn't it? It's just words. It's all sort of just cerebral concepts rather than reality. And that's it. Is the breath is what you can do life with just breath and no theology, but you can't do life with just theology and no breath. It doesn't work that way around. And that like you picked up there of like breath being spirit, and in Hebrew it's like ruach, isn't it? It's a breath of God, and that being like the life force that flows through us. And I absolutely love it. I think it's really potent and really speaks to me on like a really deep level.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. So what is it speaking to you?
I think it speaks to me like in in a way of like, and I'm going to go with what I've just experienced in the last few days and the last sort of week or so, um, is just about being present and about being in the here and now, and not not worrying, because like your breath centers you, it brings you into the present, it brings you to the now, and so many meditation techniques and spiritual practices center around breathing and your breath and focusing on your breath and being kind of conscious of your breathing and active in it. And also, I mean, not just on that level, but there's it's so life giving in that it when we take a deep breath, when we do deliberately take deep breaths, and this is sort of like, again, we learnt in our counselling course, the way it affects our parasympathetic nervous system and the release of I'm going to get these hormones wrong, but there's cortisol and is it serotonin, or I can't remember the opposite one of adrenaline. I think it's noradrenaline or noradrenaline, and it releases these calming uh, particles or elements in your brain that just, somebody who's more biologically minded than me will know. You'll know all of these things, but there's scientific evidence that deep breathing and slowing breathing, conscious breathing, all have really, really positive mental health effects as well as physical health effects. It's good for us, and I like that, and it kind of like the idea of, it doesn't affect time, but it affects our concept of time. Like taking deep breaths feels like you're slowing things down. It feels like you're taking a minute, but you're not. You're engaging in the minute. You're engaging with the now, in a way that's easy not to. And I think as well in the past for me, it's been a very, very healthy, very helpful way of letting go of things. Again, through meditation. So, I used to do this thing, haven't for a long time, but where I would breathe in and like imagine that I'm breathing in all of the qualities or characteristics that I want to embody or want that to be more me, if you like. And I suppose in the Bible that be seen as kind of like the characteristics, qualities of God, or like of what, talks about like the fruits of the spirit, or the characteristics, fruits of, there's another one in Galatians or Ephesians or whichever book it is, and about breathing in, so compassion and gentleness and kindness and all of those positive ways of being that are positive to as an outward thing. So breathe that in, and then breathing out like the negative stuff, or the stuff that I'm wanting to let go of or get rid of, or equally breathing out love and breathing out those good things as well. So it's sort of like a two-way thing. So yeah, I really love that. I think you might be muted, Tom. Or unplugged. I can't hear you.
Is that any better?
Oh, that's
Great.
There
There
we
we go. Thanks, James.
No problem.
Right. For some reason, it doesn't come up. I muted myself because I was coughing. I've still got a few leftovers from me being ill last week. So yeah, I really resonated with that. Incorporating it into some sort of meditation or prayer life, sort of thing of I think that's a big thing that I've that's changed, I think, since doing the counselling course with
mm,
my prayer is incorporating the breath a lot more.
mm,
And you're right, it is all bodily. Um, it's kind of grounding you, isn't it? And kind of
yeah,
settling that nervous system
mm,
in a really grounding way. Um, and how it can be used in kind of theology or scripture,
mm,
kind of together as a way of really meeting scripture, I guess, in a way, or
mm,
meeting these ideas of love and compassion and things. And yeah, it just reminded me of one visualization, um, which is more from mindfulness of, or to do with the breath, very much to do with the breath
mm,
mindfulness, and I think it was in a body scan led thing, and kind of imagining as you breathe in, um, all of that breath filling the whole of your body. Um,
mm,
so it's something about, or it was, I think it was that, was it breathe, or as you breathe out, you feel it going through all of that body, and there's something there about you talking about life force, or
mm,
we, Christian ideas of the breath of God. There's something about kind of acknowledging that
mm,
within your whole body, that it's not just in your head and it's not just in
yeah,
some little bit here, but there's that power, that love,
mm,
that energy is throughout us, renewing
mm,
us, changing us,
mm,
um embracing us. So that, yeah, I really resonated with that, um
yeah,
kind of connection with prayer, and
mm,
that's been something that's kind of practically kind of worked out from
mm.
studying this, I think.
Yeah, there's a real like sense that it's not God out there somewhere or like the
Yeah,
amorphous
yeah,
unknown, but the personal, intimate, internal, and I think for me that was like the biggest switch when I sort of had my spiritual awakening, or I kind of like engaged with the spiritual side of things. It was a realization that God isn't far away; He's close, He's intimate, He's near. He's
yeah.
yeah.
And I think another switch, you just got me on a train of thought of switches
Mm,
there, but
mm,
another switch that's, where you said about, what did you say, about it's not taking time away, but it's
mm,
engaging with time, and it's engaging with now.
yeah.
And I think in in a lot of my thinking, my kind of faith or theology or spirituality was all to do with the future. Is
Mm,
when I'd finally get to meet God, or when
yeah.
all things would be put right, or when whatever, some sort of future event.
Mm,
And actually, there's been a real progression, I think, to just, I mean, um, on my good days, to really seeing God in the now,
mm,
and really having that idea, yeah, God is in me, and He's also working everywhere. He's also present everywhere in this moment. Yeah, and you can link that to breath. You can link. I feel of it. Where you feel the wind, or you hear the wind, or
mm,
the idea of that life force that's all around us. It's kind of
mm,
breaking out everywhere, isn't it? Especially during spring and this time.
yeah. Mm,
Kind of there is that. I think there's been that switch, as well as from the transcendent to the immanent God,
mm,
from the future to the now God, I guess.
yeah. That's it. It's like not sort of yeah. It's like an engagement, isn't it? It's like engaging with the now, isn't it? And I just think none of this is new. None of this is like sort of like fresh ideas or anything like this. And
Mm.
I'm sure that things like mindfulness and yoga and various Eastern practices as well that just really kind of encapsulate all of this being in the now and this being in the present, and not like thinking or dwelling in the future, or trying to dwell in the future where we can't, where and it's unknown, isn't it? It's not like a it's it kind of more and more as I get older makes sense about how it brings peace. It makes sense how that the being in the present really brings peace, really kind of allows you to, or allows me to not worry and not panic and not be anxious about all sorts of stuff. And I think I guess I suppose I had a bit of a head start because I didn't really consider the future anyway. so there's probably part of it is that, but it's like in a positive way. And I think I mentioned before when we've been talking about how like that not considering the future has probably been rooted in some form of depression and like not really thinking I'm going to be here, so I don't worry about the future me because I don't really consider that as a person. But it's taking that and it's turning it and lifting it, elevating it to a place where it's a really good thing, a really healthy thing instead.
Yeah, there's something I think. Yeah, I think a lot of the mindfulness stuff is bringing out how helpful it is to return to the present and not have our thoughts continually in the future or worrying or regretting. There's something about really focusing on now that is really freeing, I guess. You're not holding the burden of the whole of time.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking as well that there's something about the breath that makes me connected to and held by everything. Like it reminds me that I'm, I need air. We kind of have this idea, I think, that we live in a vacuum, but actually we live in our environment, and we need our environment. And actually our environment is all through us. We're inhaling, we're exhaling, we're ingesting, and it's how connected I am and how held or sustained I am by that environment, which again has real spiritual overtones of God in whom we live and breathe and have our being, kind of how connected I am at every moment to this life force, to God, and that's a really like that I think that's all kind of connected to that stillness or that peace, isn't it? Because it's not when we forget that we're dependent, we then got to work out how we're going to survive by ourselves.
Then we create that vacuum for ourselves.
We do. And actually there's it kind of goes into that letting go as well, like I'm being held at this moment.
Realizing that the fact that we are dependent is a good thing, and that, as you say, being held, we're safe, that we're not we haven't been abandoned and we haven't been let go, and I don't believe that'll ever happen. I don't think we'll ever be let go. I don't think we'll ever be abandoned. It's more there's so much reassurance and it's a piece that you cannot explain, like that transcends all understanding. I think is the to quote scripture again. I'm doing that a lot, and I'm
I know. What's wrong with us today, James?
What's wrong with us? Yeah, and particularly what's wrong with me. I'm like somebody who's sort of skeptical of the Bible at best. But yeah, just the concept of it being so. So rooted in stability, and that by breathing, and it's something that we are born to do. We don't have to learn to do it. Our bodies do it naturally, and it just makes me it kind of makes me realize that that's my perception of God and spirituality, is that we all breathe. That we all 100% breathe, so that some of us are aware of it and some of us are not, and that's maybe where I am with sort of spirituality, is that some of us are aware of it, some of us are not. It doesn't mean it's not there and we don't do it, we're not engaged with it, we're just a bit like
Yeah.
distracted or blind to it, or we don't we're not focused on that, and that's okay. But it means that for people who maybe aren't so switched on to that perhaps that's where you can feel, or it can maybe lead to feeling lost and alone and in a vacuum, and having to fight for yourself when really you don't. It's all there. It's all provided.
I think that's so beautiful,
Yeah,
James. So beautiful as a
yeah. I think that just sort of kind of came as I was talking about it. So it's good. Yeah,
yeah, that we're all fundamentally spiritual,
yeah, yeah.
and we're all fundamentally connected to whatever you want to say this is. Is it God, or
Mm,
is it the whole, or is it
yeah.
life, or but and how, and I do this all the time. I'm switching
Mm,
into a different mode of being where
mm,
I'm in a vacuum again, or it's not
mm,
like I'm not, and that recentering on the breath as a spiritual practice is that
mm.
reawakening to
Yeah,
actually by spirituality, actually the
yeah.
spiritual world in which I live.
Yeah, like a refocusing of your gaze onto the like in the right direction, I suppose. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, is it? I wonder if it's refocusing or just kind of, um, when you kind of focused on something, but you can sometimes kind of soften your gaze to take in the
Mm-hmm.
bigger.
Hmm.
It's kind of almost that. It's like, oh, this is part of this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm with you. So it's like a um, yeah, take almost stepping back and seeing the whole, or seeing more. Maybe not the whole. It's
yeah,
so big.
yeah. It's like, I guess, the peripheral vision kind of
Yeah,
becomes part of it much more.
yeah.
You're not blocking it out so much.
Mm,
Yeah.
I like that. That's really
Hmm.
good.
James, I wanted to ask where you were with the Bible. You made a comment with it, and
Oh,
we've got just under 10 minutes left.
sure.
And I just wanted to, I guess I wondered, what was the issue that you've moved to? Is it the Bible, or is it the way it's used? I guess is what the
Yeah,
distinction was in
yeah.
my head.
Yeah, it's 100% the latter. Like I um I have in the past absolutely loved the Bible and really engaged with it and got a huge amount from it. Um, when I first sort of came to faith, that I buried myself in it. I just read voraciously through it. I'm a bit of a reader anyway, and I just plowed into it. I obviously had a bit of a background in sort of like some biblical teachings from when I was a child, and I'd heard all of these stories. I
Mm.
mean, we learn about Noah, and we learn about Jonah and the whale, and or the fish, and you kind of think there's a lot of sea based, a huge amount in there that's sea based. It just so happens when you're a kid that's what you're taught, and a whole bunch, a
Yep.
host of other things, and like the parables of Jesus and so on. And then when I came to faith, all the things kind of started slotting into place, and they started to make sense. And then when I went through and was reading the Bible, bits that I didn't really understand or didn't get, I just carried on reading. I didn't like stop to question or stop to sort of like really interrogate or anything like that. I was just like, okay, yeah, that's what it says. Fair enough, let's move on. Which I think was quite helpful at the time, because it meant that later on, as things did become a bit clearer, or as I learnt more, or through various other people like who had a lot more understanding and knowledge of the Bible than I do, spoke to me, it kind of brought a bit more revelation, a bit more understanding. And so I think what happened was I then, as life went on, I encountered the Bible being used quite aggressively to damage people, and that made me reject not only the way those people were behaving, but also the Bible to an extent. Um, and then a good friend of mine at the time said, the Bible's like a hammer, and this is like one of the best analogies I've ever come across. It's like a hammer or a powerful tool. It is a tool, and ultimately, in the hands of the wrong people, or somebody who with the wrong intention or the wrong understanding or training, or somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, that can be quite a damaging thing, and quite potently damaging as well. And I think that as I'd encountered that, and then also started to make me question, okay, have I done that as well? Have I been careless with the way I've used the Bible, or the way I've used elements of the Bible to, and I don't think I have, and certainly not intentionally, but there's certainly the possibility that that's happened. I suppose it like kind of comes under the umbrella of spiritual abuse, and the ways that manifests itself. So that's why I suppose now I'm less so than I was maybe a couple of years ago, but warier of the Bible than I was, and I think that it's easy for the Bible to become quite a place of conflict, and a place of or a catalyst for quite divisive thought. So that's I guess why I kind of hold it with a bit more caution, and a bit more I'm a little bit more skeptical about the ways it's being used and has been used. And yet there are things in there that I know, and I know that because having seen the way my understanding of it has changed and grown, that's where it's I can see the value of it, and I know historically it's hugely valuable as well. So, yeah, does that
yeah, and it does, yeah, and I really feel that link to how we hammer people with it, and we hit people with it, and that link to spiritual abuse. I'm just taking that. I'm kind of in my head. I'm taking that a bit further, because for me, it's not a tool. I think it kind of jarred with me when you said tool, and for me, I was thinking, what would I use? And it's almost like a piece of artwork. And some, there's some ugly bits in that piece of artwork that I don't want to look at. But also, like, I think art at its best is when you gaze at it and it kind of does something to change you, but it's kind of almost imperceptible.
Yeah.
And I feel like, the problem, maybe I think for me, the problem is that we're using that piece of artwork as a hammer. We're using it as a tool, and then we end up hitting over. We end up trying to fix things in our life with it. Like we try hammering nails with this piece of artwork, but we also end up hammering other people with that piece of artwork. And then I was just thinking, and then we got maybe different people trying to fight each other with bits of artwork. We all got a kind of quite fun in my head, but I was just that's where I went, sort of thing.
I like that. And that I think that's probably a much truer analogy or metaphor for it than just seeing it as a tool. That yes, it can be used as a tool, but it's not necessarily its purpose. Yeah, I like that. And I suppose that one of the best things that somebody taught me was that the Bible, and it's like the clues in the name, right? It's a library, and it's a collection of books and letters and histories and stories and poems and proverbs, and they're all like bundled in together. And then, there's some order and there's some organization there, but it's not necessarily the order and organization that you'd expect or that you would want. And yet that's how it is. And also the Bible as we've got it at the moment has only really existed for the last, say, 400 years since the time of the printing press. So before then it was always scrolls or a few books or like some scrolls and some books, and everybody's Bible was different, because they had like, oh, I've got the copy of this letter from John, and actually my copy of this letter from John doesn't have the end bit, which yours does, and this sort of thing. So it's such a scrutinized collection, such a scrutinized anthology, that I suppose it does stand well. It totally has stood the test of time, and it's fascinating that we've almost crystallized it. And so in the past, say, as I say, about 400 odd years, we've made the Bible a fixed given the Bible a fixed identity, whereas before it wouldn't have had a fixed identity. And as a result, it has become a bit more immutable, a bit more, we can think of this more like an embodiment of God, a physical embodiment of God. And that's where, totally, that's where I get really stuck. I really get stuck when it's referred to as the Word of God, and I'm like, oh, I just don't know if I agree. Or in fact, I definitely don't. And yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, go on, James.
It's just like so for me, Word of God feels like a title, and it feels like it's a title that belongs to Jesus, not to a book, or not to a collection of books, or not to a collection of stories. It's sort of that can be interpreted and misinterpreted and seen in all sorts of different angles and ways, depending on our lenses. And there's so many different things that I'm like, yeah, that feels problematic to me, calling it the Word of God, because then it adds a power to it that I don't feel is necessarily appropriate. And that's where, like, maybe, yeah, of course, I think I totally agree with you with regards to feeling it like it's a piece of artwork, and then it suddenly speaks to you in a way that you go, oh, I never noticed that before, I never saw that before. But I don't know, that I suppose for me, like, yeah, as I say, it's a place of conflict, and not necessarily a place of conflict between me and other people, but between me and me. You know, I'm conflicted about the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I think I found that really fascinating as an idea, James, that I've not really come across, that, you know, since the printing press, it's become this one version.
Static.
And then it can, that's really interesting. And I had a thought. What was the thought? Yeah, and I think there's a lot in us that is setting this up as a either or.
Yeah.
Or a lot in our theologies that sets this up. You know, we have made our theologies so that it's either or, haven't we?
Yes, very binary. Yeah.
Very binary, and you're either a Bible believing Christian or you're not.
Or you're not, and if you're not, well, you're obviously a heathen. You're obviously going to hell. It's like, whoa, hang on.
I know.
Concepts that we haven't even discussed.
And it's, you know, it's a really difficult question for Christians, I think, of how do we hold this balance between believing. I think I'm still in a place, well, I am still in a place that these are the words of God, in they are, I don't know what you want to say, inspired or something that
there's something there. There's something
there. Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah.
Something really there. And we can argue about how much is there, or, you know, how much is there above other books, I guess, and we might disagree in that. But how do I hold that, and I hold everything that, you know, everything we know about the disagreements, the interpretations, the lenses that you were talking about, the social, you know, how socially situated we are affects our interpretation, if we're modernists, or if we're postmodernists, or if we're traditionalists, you know, all of these, and our own personal histories, and how one story can completely change me one day and mean nothing, or mean something very different to me the other day. You know, how do we hold all that? I think we're pushed into a place where you're told you can't, or it becomes very anxiety provoking to try
Yeah.
and hold it,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
which which I think is just never healthy, because
Mm,
you're living with that anxiety and you can't be honest with it then.
exactly. Yeah. I think I would always recommend for people to read it, like
Mm,
however they want. Read it. It's amazing. It's
yeah.
absolutely incredible. And yeah, I would hope that there would be parts of it that would really speak to people,
Mm,
in and really speak to them in like an enlivening, a life-giving way, as opposed to in a way that brings them shame or guilt, or wants that brings fear or anything like that. And I don't believe it's written in a way that does that, but I know that it can be interpreted in a way that does that. Um, so yeah, I would definitely encourage people to read it and advise caution on on how they interpret.
mm.
Yeah,
And
ask.
maybe that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's And we take it as we take it where we're at in that moment, don't
Yeah,
we?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, great. I think we're about there to wrap up,
Mm,
James.
yeah.
Anything that's really still with you that you wanna say?
Um, no, just sort of it seems odd, doesn't it, to like have kind of frozen the Bible in time, or frozen what we imagine the Bible to be in time. And I know that many denominations use various versions of the Bible with various apocrypha and stuff like that. And yeah, it's interesting. Like when we talk of the Bible, what do we actually mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Lots of questions. Lots of questions.
yeah, yeah. And that's what spirituality, I think,
I think that's
is
where we
is
come back
part a
to.
big part of it is
Yeah,
is having those questions, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it as always, James,
Yeah,
and it's been great doing it again. It's been a few
yeah.
weeks.
It's good to catch back up again. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And hopefully you guys have really found this helpful, or can
Mhm.
take away things as well. And we'll be back again, all being well, next week. Okay. Take care, guys.